Good morning, everyone. The presentation is called Smarter Approach to API Load Testing. My name is Julian Vargas, Engineering Manager in the API testing team. And let's talk about load testing and the benefits that we get by implementing it in our organization. So one of the benefits is that we can stress our endpoints by using functional tests. We can measure the average response time over or under the load, the very high load of concurrent users consuming a given endpoint. We can identify the application breakpoints, and we can identify the impacts of code changes. And actually, this last one is the one that we are going to be focused on today. An overview of how load testing works in API testing. So in the purple square, we have source API testing, which is our product, and there we create functional testings. Functional tests. The functional test is a verification that we perform over a given endpoint. So we execute the test to perform a request to the production server or any environment that is accessible through the cloud, and we validate the response. When it comes to load test, what we do is we send the configuration or the definition of that particular functional test to load agents that are running in your infrastructure, ideally in a different machine from the one running the application itself. Every load agent will receive sort of a copy of the functional test and will execute it simultaneously in order to hammer the API, simulating real traffic from the users. And this is what we are going today, with the difference that everything will be running in my local computer. Therefore, I won't have like a different machine for running the application and running the load agents. Everything will be running in the same machine. What do we need for running this example? We need an active Sauce Labs account. We need Sauce Connect because the example application will run in localhost, and Sauce Labs runs obviously on the cloud. So we need a tunneling tool for accessing localhost from the cloud. So we're going to use Sauce Connect. The runtime will be Dino, because this allows us to execute TypeScript without npm or installing any external dependencies, just TypeScript run by Dino. And we will use Docker because these agents that we have here, the load agents, are Docker containers. So this allows you to use any container orchestration technology that you have in your company to set up the testing experiments, the load experiments. So let's see how the API works. So I have here in my computer an example that we used in a previous recording, which is the Sauce server. So I'm going to run. Let me actually increase my font size a little bit. I'm going to run Tmux. And just for the uninitiated, Tmux is a multiplexing tool for terminals. So over one single terminal, I can run multiple windows. So in this case, I'm running window number 0, running bash, and the star indicates that this is the window that I'm currently working on. And if I open a new window, now I'm in the window number 1, and I can switch between those two. If you see the star at the bottom, it shows the window that I'm on at the any given moment. So the API, I have a Sauce server.typescript, which basically is receiving requests on port 8000. It will retrieve the query parameter _4. It will query the business logic, will access the business logic to give me the best sauce for the given food that I'm passing on as parameters. The default food is fries. So if I say, for instance, what is the best sauce for fries, it will give me, for instance, ketchup. It will perform some logging, and then at the end, it will return a JSON document with the sauce, this property, and the corresponding sauce retrieved from the business logic. And in sauce.ts, I have the business logic. So I have a database, the most reliable and high-performance database in existence, which is a hash map, with 3 entries. Fries will be ketchup, rice will be honey mustard, and nuggets will be Szechuan sauce. And I return that value, and that's it. So I'm going to run my server with Dino run. This parameter is because I need my server to access the port 8000. So I need to allow network and the name of my script. And the application is running in localhost. Now, to be sure that the application is running, that the API is running, I'm going to use an HTTP client. So I have a question for the audience. What is the best HTTP client out there? Anyone? Okay, the best HTTP client out there is curl. So I do curl HTTP localhost 8000 sauce for, let's say, fries. And I have my JSON with ketchup, and here I have my log, right? Let me try my API with a different food, let's say nuggets. And I have my Szechuan sauce, and again, my log. So this is my API running in port 8000. Is running in localhost. This will be my production environment. Okay, the next thing that we need is the tunnel, because as I said, since we are going to test this API using sauce API testing, we need to access my localhost from the cloud. So I'm going to do, just briefly, I have this file, tunnel.yaml, which is the configuration for Sauce Connect. The important values here are the user and the API key. And I'm going to show you how you can get there. You can get these values. Click here. So if you go to API testing, sorry, to Sauce Labs, you go to your account and settings, and there you will see your username here and the access key here. So you just copy those values and set them in the tunnel. These 2 values, we are going to need them a little bit later for setting up the agents. For now, this will do. So Sauce Connect, tunnel. Let's wait for the tunnel to start. Exactly, curl. And voila, we have the tunnel running. Okay, now I'm going back to API testing. Here I have my project, and I'm going to write my functional test. So I'll do HTTP localhost 8000 for fries. I will send this request. It fails because, as I said, we cannot access my local host. So I select the tunnel that I just opened and try again. And it works. So I generate my test. I want sauce. And from here, I'm going to publish my test. So what do I have so far? I have a functional test. If I run this test with this button, I can see that it works because obviously that is expected. It is accessing my API for real. If I go to the Windows 0, let me add some space here and run the test again. Notice that I'm receiving the request from the cloud and my API is responding as expected. Now, let's see how this works with how to convert this functional test into a load test. So I'm going to click here and I will create load test. So let's see what we have here. First of all, the name of the test. So I'll do everybody wants to roll the sauce. And we have the, this field is important, the ramp up time, which is for the amount of time that we are going to allow the agents to fully engage into the load, in the load testing, because in some cases, the applications need some warm-up time. Let's say if you are running services written in Java needs some time to fully boot up. So this allows us to decide how many seconds we are going to let the user agents to reach the full capacity for testing for hammering the endpoint. So for this example, I will use like 10 seconds. And I'm not going to wait 10 minutes because that is too much. So I will use just 3 minutes. And I will this one like this for now. The intensity map will let me set up how the user agents will behave on every minute. So starting, I will say that my agents will, let's say, try with an intensity of 40%. And this is because every agent will execute the functional test, and it will sleep or rest for a little bit before running the test again. So if I do 100%, it will run the test, and then again, and so on. But here, if I lower this value a little bit, it will give some sleep time after every execution. But on the minute 1, I will do 100, and I will stay at 100 until the end of the 3rd minute. And here is the configuration for the agents. Okay, so these agents, as I said before, are the containers that I'm going to run in my infrastructure in order to concurrently perform the request to the endpoint. So in order to do that, I will use this this line that you can copy paste from our documentation. I already did that, and this one I'm going to show you here. Called test agent. So is the line for running the container, my user, my access key, and I'm going to allow a maximum of 100 virtual users for this test agent. So if I do source test agent.sh, it will spawn one container and will report that that container using my credentials to Sauce Labs. So after it is running, if I go back to my load testing page, I will see that I have one load agent able to receive up to 100 virtual users. So I'm going to choose this one for this particular load test, and I'm going to request 100 virtual users for that agent. Okay. So one thing here before we start executing the load test. The thing is that I am running this using everything in my local computer. So that means that if I perform this test, it will go to localhost 8000, and that works. But also means that this test, just as it is, will be sent to the load agents. So every load agent, we also do localhost 8000. But inside those containers, localhost 8000 is not running anything. So we need to somehow allow the containers to access my local computer to actually consume the API. This obviously, as I said, is because I'm running everything in my computer in a real environment, because it will be running different machines. This won't be required. So what I'm gonna do is create an environment. Well, let's say melting pot for my sauce. Melting pot. And here I'm going to create one variable called host domain, and it will be host.docker kernel 8000. So this value here will replace localhost when running the test from inside the load agents. So I'm going to confirm, and now I have everything. So I have the name of my test, the ramp up time in seconds, for a total of 3 minutes. I have my environment, my configuration, my available test agents, and the number of virtual users per agent. I save, and I run. It's running. If I check here in my terminal, I see my load agents, my load agent, and it's 100 users performing the functional test to the against the API. This is going to run for 3 minutes, so this will be some awkward silence. So if anyone wants to break the ice, please go ahead and chat, ask questions.
Yeah, Julian, Andreas just asked, will the session be recorded? Yes, we are recording, and we will share via email in a couple of days.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gabe. Any other question or comments?
Julian, here's a question from Gus Rodriguez. Can you set pacing here?
If I understand the question, the idea is that every time you set up the load test, let's say you can customize the intensity, right? Because in this case, for instance, I went from 40% to 100%, but of course, in a real scenario, you can do this incrementally and set up the ramp up. Combine these two: the ramp up time in seconds plus the intensity over the time, the execution time.
Okay, thanks, Julian. Please feel free to ask more questions. I have a few questions in queue here. Let's start with Gerard Molina. Are these testing tools available to be automated and report the results somewhere? For example, running every day at 2 a.m. and report results in the Slack channel.
Yes, we have the scheduler where you can schedule your tests at any given time to run them periodically, and everything will be reported in the dashboard. And well, we don't have the Slack connector yet, but that is in the roadmap. But the answer is yes, you can schedule your executions. And also, in a different webinar, we showed how to integrate API testing with a continuous integration pipeline. Okay, so after these long 3 minutes, finally, the load agent is done executing the load. If I go back to my report, I will see that it took 3 minutes, 100 bits per users. I see the list of endpoints that I'm using. The average time is 383 milliseconds, and so on. No failures, because obviously this is Dino. And some statistics of the response time. We have the minimum values per minute. Everything is aggregated every minute. At the moment, we are not offering the statistics per second or per group of seconds. It's every minute. We have the average value. Everything is in average under 500 milliseconds, which is acceptable. And also we have the maximum and the 19th percentile. Okay. You can download this to CSV to perform your own analysis. And here you have the total number of requests over the time of execution, also the number of failures per minute, and the total amount of status codes. And here is important to clarify something, and is that we use a special notation when there is an error executing the load test. We have 3 special status codes, which is -1 for connection refused, -2 for timeout, and -3 for unknown host. And we do this because one thing is when you run a test and part of your expectation is to have a connection timeout and so on. And a different thing is when you have those errors executing a load test. So in order to differentiate the status codes expected in a functional test from the status code resulting in a load test, we use that particular notation, and you can read more about it in the documentation page. Okay, we have this initial baseline with this configuration. 10 seconds for ramp up, 3 minutes in total, 100 virtual users, everything running in one computer. So let's see what happens if I implement some changes in my code. So I'm going to stop my server, and I will do source.ts. And let's say that my 10-star rockstar engineer says that my service is actually too fast, and we need to add some analysis to give the impression that the API is actually processing something. So let's add some delay to this. I'm going to import sleep from Dino sleep, and here after loading my database, I will do const let's say a random number between 0 and 30 seconds. And then wait. Processing delay. Mat seal random speed, yes. So this is the changes that I'm going to deploy to production. Then I deploy to production again, which is running my API. It's running, and without changing anything else, I'm going to measure the impact of this tiny change in the overall performance of the API. So I will run the load test again. It is running. Let's see. It's receiving. This is the API. And these are the agents. So we have another 3 long minutes of staring this screen. So if you have more questions, please go ahead.
Hey, Julian, I wrote down some questions from earlier. Might as well ask one now. Can you run load test in production
Yes, but
alongside synthetic monitors?
yes, you can, but of course you have to keep in mind that any interaction with a production environment will create memory consumption, traffic, and so on. So the overall performance will be impacted. So that is something to keep in mind. And also consider running load test. If you want to have good results, run those tests the day of the week when you expect least traffic. Because obviously it doesn't make any sense to run load test on the peak days.
Also in the chat, I'm going to share a link to an ebook that, oh, go ahead, I'll share later.
No, go ahead, you can share. I'm just waiting for this to finish.
Yeah, so I just shared a link to an ebook that dives into what our load tests can cover and find in production that your synthetic monitors cannot. And so, a lot of our customers find this incredibly beneficial. Well, and here's a question from Andreas. In which environment would you recommend running load tests?
All of them. Because obviously, in this particular case, let's say, just for as a discussion, if you are going to implement some major refactor or overhauling or improvements on the optimizing indexes or whatever, and you need to measure how that is impacting the API, well, run it on a testing environment. Just run the load test before, just as I did, then implement the changes, run again, and compare. But also, it will be very interesting if you do the same in production, obviously, when the traffic is low, to be sure that the production environment is capable to handle the traffic on peak days. For instance, let's say you take the statistics, the total number of concurrent users you had last year during Black Friday, plus 20%, because one of the consequences of the lockdown is the increase in birth rate. I don't know why. But there will be more work for Santa this year. So take those values, set up a load test, wait for next, I don't know, Monday close to midnight, where you expect this traffic, and run that and see how your production environment behaves, so that it will be ready for the next Black Friday. Same for Thanksgiving. In Thanksgiving, people book tickets. So analyze your statistics, create a similar setup, and run in production. Okay, so this one is done. We wait for a couple of seconds, because after every execution from the agents, they send the information to the dashboard in order to perform the consolidation. And since we have 100 bills per user, that means that we need to aggregate a lot of data. So just a couple of seconds, and This is done. And we can see here that fortunately, the API didn't fail at all, so no errors, but the impact in the average response time was huge because we went from an average of 383 milliseconds to 15,335 milliseconds. So as you can see, without changing anything in the load test, in the configuration, I was able to run the before and after an important change in the code. Okay. Okay, let's resume. Some recommendations: start small to get acquainted with load testing. Play with it, change values, try different configurations until you make sense of the results. Use production traffic values to produce more reliable results. Is what I just mentioned, the two examples, the one from Black Friday and Thanksgiving. And also use load testing continuously to measure the impact of code changes. This is really important. And that's it. Thank you very much for your attention and for your time. And please ask questions.
Okay, thanks everyone. Lynn, here's a question from Masa.
Yes.
Is there a limit in entering total number of virtual users?
That depends on your infrastructure, on the size of your machine. In my case, as I showed, when I run this, test agent, here I said that this particular container will handle up to 100 virtual users, but that is completely up to you. If you have a very huge machine, you can deploy as many containers as you wish with as many virtual users as you wish. That is the limit is your infrastructure.
Oh, okay, great. I have a few more questions in queue here. Anyone else, feel free to add questions to Q&A. I'll pull some questions from chat. We want to optimize our API infrastructure. Can Sauce Labs do spike testing and soak testing so we can estimate the scalability for anticipated spikes?
If I understand correctly, the answer is yes. Nonetheless, I think there is some difference between spike testing and load testing and soak testing. They are related, but not the same. Nonetheless, that is what I'm encouraging you to try with this configuration, because you can actually set up the total number of users. Let's say we can do this. Let's say we can do like 30 minutes, right? And during those 30 minutes, you will have like, I don't know, normal traffic, and then you peak. And then 2 minutes later, you go down. And then you wait for the amount of time that you are expecting for your infrastructure to take down those extra servers, and then you peak again. And then you go down again, immediately pick up again, and go down, and so on.
Oh, okay, good. Lynn, another question. How does Sauce Labs load testing fit into our spec-driven development plans?
Spec-driven development, you set up your functional test at the top of the test pyramid to cover the behavior from the external perspective. Okay, spec. Okay, got it. That is more related to contract testing. We can do that, and you can, for instance, set up the upload specification and then ensure that the response that you're receiving from the server matches the specification, right? So let's say if you have actually let me show you. If I'm here, of course this is out of the scope, but don't tell anyone. I'm going to, for instance, upload an open API spec. Where is it? Where is it? Source recipe, client, and I upload my contract. This contract is an open API specification, right? And when I'm generating contract testing, I will have an additional assertion that will assure that the response that I receive from my server will have this particular configuration. So if I run, in this case, the test should pass, I suppose, after the sleep time. But the answer is yes. And that is called contract testing, and we can do that. And actually, if you search for contract testing at Sauce Labs, there is the recording of the webinar that we recorded on June, if I remember correctly. And there is a full example there.
Okay, thanks, Julian. Question from Masa. Can test results be exported?
Yes. You can export to CSV, clicking here. Or here.
So I think if there are no more questions, I have one more question from chat, but does anyone else have any questions they can think of? Okay, this final question looks like it comes from a mobile developer asking about how does Sauce Labs help us solve inefficient code?
Inefficient code? Well, I don't know, but if you deploy your bad code to through an API, you can use load testing for measuring that. And also functional test. When you run a functional test and you deploy bad code, means you deploy a bug, naturally the functional test will break.
In the link to the ebook I shared, there are some interesting real customer stories in there, where we had examples of bugs bringing down very large companies, losing revenues for days because of this problem. So I encourage you to take a look at the ebook for some insight into how customers of ours have actually made their code more resilient and efficient.
Sorry, and I just came to my mind that Sauce has a product called Real Device RDC, Real Device, I forgot the C.
Yeah, Cloud, RDC.
Yes, to actually test mobile applications. So in my area, we test APIs, but we have another product for testing the clients.
Yep. And what's great is that you can generate functional tests from those RDC jobs. So it's very easy to do RDC mobile testing and API testing simultaneously.
This is what I did here. When I'm in the HTTP client, I can import the Open API, Postman collection, a hard file that I have in my computer, or an RDC or VDC job that I have in SOS, and generate tests for those.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate your attending, and we hope you learned some interesting stuff. Please look out for some really nice announcements that are coming out from us as we continue to grow load testing for the new way that people work. We'll talk to you soon. Julian, any last words?
Thank you very much for your time, and have a great day.